Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to do a primitive vignette because I still need to do the primitive birdhouse that I spoke about in the last video. And I'm going to start with this with a little planter, and I had my husband drill a birdhouse hole in it. And now I'm going to add this lampshade or light shade from a garage, and these are very old. I'm going to take this little rusty piece off the top because that's just going to get in the way. And I've already cleaned it. I know it doesn't look like it. There's a lot of rust, but I love the look. That just is going to add to the primitive look. And I just kind of pried that off because it was so weak with all the rust that it was very easy to do. And then I'm going to use some E6000 and glue this to the top of the birdhouse body. Now obviously I'll just have to concentrate my glue just on the outer edge of the birdhouse because that's all that's going to come into contact with it. Now this piece, and I'm not real sure what it is. I got it in some stuff that I bought from an estate sale. It's a little pot of some kind on the top. Most of you will probably know what this is, but again, I don't. But my plan was to use the bottom part of this as the stand for the birdhouse. So I added at some point, and then I took it off because it just seemed so top heavy. And I couldn't find anything to use as a base on the very bottom. So again, this is just something that I did and took off. But I am gluing the lid to that on top of this because I needed something to hide that hole. And that's what I was going to use to kind of go together with the bottom in the beginning. So I just decided to go ahead and leave that part on just for lack of having something else to go on it. In hindsight, I could have put a doorknob on the top and that would have worked well. And I probably should have used my E6000 here, and I'll probably have to go back and re-glue that because my E6000 got a hole in it, and I ended up having to throw it away. I wish that their tubes were easier to use and didn't puncture so easily when you roll that, which is pretty much what you have to do to get it out when it gets down low. And what I'm doing here is just gluing an old handle that I found in some of my stash to the bottom. Now I wish I was in frame better here, but I just glued it to the very bottom of this, and then it acts as a perch. And I attached it with a couple of small screws, and now I am adding this birdhouse to a slice of wood to use as the base because I felt like having that large top, it needed to have a larger bottom. So once I got that complete, then I'm just going to add the top. And I thought about just leaving that top, just laying on the top so that it could be removable and be a clean out. But obviously the buyer wouldn't want that to be in two pieces. So I'm going to glue it on. And again, I'm just going to glue the very edge, around the very edge, and then attach that roof. And this is going to be a very simple birdhouse, but when it comes to primitive, I think that the more simple it is, the more primitive it looks. And here I'm using some Gorilla Glue to glue that on and just glue a really good bead around the outer edge. And that's all that I did to this one. Again, it's very simple and even dark, but that works for primitive. So we'll see how it sells. I can always add more embellishments later if I decide it needs it. And then here I'm doing a little fall decor with a jar. So I think this jar might have came from the Dollar Tree at some point. But the lid something happened with the lid, so I don't know where it is, so I decided to make something that I won't need the lid for. And I'm putting a coat of Slick Stick on this. And Slick Stick is a Dixie Belle product that helps paint stick to very slick surfaces. So I use it almost always when I'm working with glass. So I put one coat on this and let it dry well, and then it's ready to paint. And for the paint color, I'm using the color Terra, and that is a Dixie Belle color mixed with some baking soda. So I want about half and half, and since I'm just guesstimating it, I'm just adding a little at a time until I get the thickness that I want. And then I'm just going to paint this on. One coat covers it well, but what I want to do is keep my strokes going in the same direction. So other than there at that rim, I need to keep my strokes vertical. And then once it's painted and dry, then I want to add a little bit of color in it. I'm going to add just a little bit of Buttercream. That's also a Dixie Belle color, and then the color Sea Glass, which is a Dixie Belle color. So I'm just kind of adding a little on, and then I'll do some blending with some more of this terracotta on my brush. If I had painted this with it dry, I wouldn't have had to go back and blend it again with the terracotta, but since I let it dry well first, then I just put, and I don't even change my brush between colors because I want this color to be kind of blended and muted and just look more natural. So it works well to just use the same brush during the whole process. Now, if you can't tell, I am painting this to somewhat resemble a pumpkin. And obviously, it's going to be obvious that it's a jar, but the reason I want it to look somewhat like a pumpkin is because I'm going to use this as a base for a 3-tiered pumpkin. So once I got this painted and dried, then I took my first pumpkin, and these are just some that I bought in with an estate sale that had a lot of fall decor, and I just found some that would fit. And I don't know how to get it on film, but I cut the bottom out of the first pumpkin so that it would set down over that jar lid and cover that up so that you didn't see the neck of the jar, if that makes sense. And then I glued the next one on. Now, I haven't painted this top one yet. The second one I had started painting at some point, but I haven't the top one yet. And then I just went out in the yard and found a stick, and I replaced the stem from the top pumpkin and kind of hollowed that out in the center and took that stick all the way through, and that will help hold it together. So I made sure to get a stick that was long enough to go all the way to the bottom of the jar and stick out above the top long enough for the stem. And obviously I also put some hot glue down in that before I stuck the stick in it. And now I'm painting this top one the color Buttercream. I could have done this ahead of time, but this is something I just kind of created as I went, so I wasn't real sure what I was going to use, and just decided it wouldn't be hard to paint it with it together. So this one gets the color Buttercream, and of course that center one I had already painted with the color Sea Glass, and I had already added some extra color in it like I did that jar. So I'll add some shading to the top of this one, and I just used some of my Dixie Belle brown glaze, and just took a little brush and just brushed some in the center of the sections, and just kind of blended them out. And just that little bit of shading takes this up to a different level and gives it more of a natural pumpkin look and not the look of just styrofoam. And then I just started adding some Spanish moss in between each of these little pumpkins just to fill all that in and make it look more natural. So as you can see there at the bottom, you can see just a slight bit of that little neck of the pumpkin, and that's something I definitely wanted to hide. Again, it's you can tell that bottom is a jar, but it makes a good base, so it adds the weight that you need at the bottom, and then it also has a good flat bottom and will set easier on a shelf or wherever you decide to put it. I like to keep this Spanish moss on hand, and I use a lot of it in bird's nests, but in the fall I use it in a lot of my projects because it adds a good it adds texture, and it adds a natural look to my decor. And again, it works really well for fill-in. So I keep filling in between, and then I'm going to add just a little bit to the top of that to hide any little bit of that opening there that is still showing. Then I added a little fall hang tag, and this was complete. And next I'm going to show you another way to make over a styrofoam pumpkin. And I started with a pumpkin that I had base coated with just one coat. I think I'm using one that I got at the Dollar Tree last year, or at the Dollar Tree. And I painted one coat on it, and it wasn't full coverage, but that's okay. I just wanted to somewhat cover that bright orange. All this is going to be hidden anyway. I had done the base coating ahead of time, and so it wouldn't have been completely necessary to even paint this one. But now I'm cutting out a hole in the bottom. I already had the hole in the top where I had removed the stem, and so I added one to the bottom as well, because the idea that I came up with on this one is going to require the hole being at the top and the bottom. Now, I've seen these done with yarn, and with the big yarn or even the small yarn, but I thought, why not use book pages? And with yarn, you use one long piece, obviously, and you just keep going around and around and around the pumpkin until you cover the whole thing. But because, obviously, I'm not going to have a long piece of this, I just took one book page, and I just kind of wadded it up, rolled it and wadded it, twisted it until I got one strip, and that strip just so happened to fit around the pumpkin enough to stuff inside the top and inside the bottom. And then I just did this all around the pumpkin. Now, every now and then, you're going to have to kind of fill in a space down the sides because of the top and bottom being smaller because it's all going into that one little hole. So you're going to have a little fill in. And when you do that, you just kind of every now and then take a shorter piece and just kind of glue down in between where you have an empty space, and then fill it in with, and then go back with the long one. So again, every probably third or fourth time you'll need to do that, and you just keep doing it until you cover the whole thing. Now, you could use newspaper and your pieces would be longer, and I guess you could take them all the way through and back around if you chose to do that. But mine took a little bit longer. I just did one at a time, and obviously you have to hold it until it sticks and then move on to the next one. And I'm going to show you where I pieced some of that just so you'll know what I'm talking about. So as you can see, I started it here lower than I generally did. I didn't start at the hole in the top. I started toward the center more and just filled in that space. And I took this one all the way to the bottom, but sometimes I would just fill in down the side like I am right here and start my strip lower and then end it before I get to the bottom, if that makes sense. And that's what I'm doing here, just gluing a small strip in the center so that I don't have empty space there and it doesn't get too bulky at the top and the bottom. And I actually added 2 of them like that on this part of it. And there you can see a strip down the center, but I'll glue that and push it together more. So I do this all the way around. And then when I get it fully covered, then I'm just going to dry brush some of this terracotta color over this. The reason I want to just dry brush it, I don't want full coverage at all here because I want you to be able to see the book pages. I want to be able to tell that there's words there, but I wanted to add that color. So another thing I probably could have done would be water my paint down a lot, but I just didn't want to wet my book pages too much and cause the glue to come loose. So again, I just dry brushed down each side or down around the whole pumpkin. And again, this is another area where I'm trying to keep my brush strokes in the same direction. And then when I finished that, then I took another page and twisted it and made a pumpkin stem. And I purposely twisted it tighter and added some glue to kind of make it bend in places so that it would look more realistic. And then I just brushed some of my brown glaze on this and then glued it to the top of the pumpkin. Then I just tied some raffia grass to the top and added a hang tag, and this was finished. And I love how this one turned out, but to be honest, this one was a little time consuming, so maybe not the most efficient one to make to resell. Obviously, you have almost nothing in your materials, but you do have a little more time in it. And now the next item that I'm going to make over is another pumpkin. And I'm going to make it from a burlap sack. Now these could be made in all different sizes. The one that I'm making is rather large, but I actually have some larger burlap sacks that I could make an even larger one. I think that they would be really pretty done in different sizes as a set. Now here I have cut some leaves from some green burlap and added those to the top. I forgot that I added those. So the first thing that I want to do with my sack, and this could be done afterwards, after you stuff the bag, but I'm just going to give this one dry brush coat of the color terracotta. And I do want some of that burlap to show through. So again, this is not something that I want full coverage on. So I just paint both sides of this bag and then let those dry. And then after those were dry, then I needed to add some stuffing. But before I added the stuffing, I put some pebbles in the bottom. And I put several in the bottom of mine because I want this to be something that could be set at a front door or something and wouldn't get blown away and would set up really straight. So I just really worked that gravel down to the bottom and pushed it down so that I had a good flat bottom. And then I added my stuffing, and I'm just using polyfill here, and this would be a good project to use just old pillows that have gotten damaged or stained or something like that, to use up that filling on, because it's going to use quite a bit of filling here. And I just kept stuffing until I felt like I had it the size that I wanted it. And then I just gathered it at the top and tied it off with some jute twine. And then once I got it tied off, and I made sure that that stuffing was down inside it well, then I'll add the stem. And I just, again, just found a stick in the yard that was the right size. And I just stuffed it down in there and glued it in place. But before I did that, I cut away the excess fabric. You're going to have some. And I just kind of pulled at it so that I would have some fraying. I felt like that was a better look. And then I just stuffed the stick down in there and glued it in place. And then this just sets up really easy. It's adding that gravel to the bottom. If you didn't have the gravel, you could use maybe beans or rice or something like that. But because we are a landscape yard, I have gravel. That's the easiest thing for me to access. So then I just added some greenery and some raffia grass around the top, and then this one was complete. Obviously I did add a hang tag. And I love how simple this one was and how well it turned out. So again, I'll probably be making several of those. You could also tie just strips of primitive looking fabric around the top to embellish it. Anything that has a primitive look, I feel like would look really good tied around this. And just a reminder, I'm going to be adding my address in the description for those of you who want to participate in making Christmas hang tags and sending them in for me to decorate a tree this year with. And I will feature those on my video as I get them, and then use them to decorate a tree. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.